Today we are going to be working in the Ken Matsuda coloring book. I showed this in my Monday video in a little mini haul, and I have done some, well, kind of little testing with the inks in the front of the book and an inconspicuous page just to see how it handles water. I figured since Ken shares some watercolor tips and tricks in the beginning of the book that it should be okay, but I wanted to test it out first. So these are Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India Inks. They come in two sets, and I have both sets. I played around with these in another picture the other day in one of my Kirby books, and I should have known better because Kirby's books in the US don't like water. But they are supposed to be light, fast, and waterproof. Pigmented India ink holds a fine line without spreading, flows smoothly without the tip drying. Well, there's no little thing in here, so I'll talk about that in just a second. Non-clogging and non-toxic. Now, you can use water with these inks to thin them out and get lighter washes, like you can with watercolor. I know a lot of people like these because you can use them for your base and then go over the top of them with watercolor or gouache without your bottom layer moving. These are pretty similar, from my understanding, to working with Inktense. So once your ink dries, that layer is permanent, and then you can layer more on top of it. Now, these also come in the bigger glass bottles with the droppers on the top, which were a little bit more expensive, so I went for the smaller bottles. And I won't say I necessarily regret it, but there's no little plunger in here, so if you don't have pipettes, you can pour a little bit out in your palette and do it that way. I highly recommend, if you have a craft store or whatnot, that you can get some of the little plastic pipettes, of picking up some of those, because as we can see, a little bit of this goes a long way, and I didn't use all of this up on my other image, and it's wasted now. So work in small batches lest you waste your ink. And we're going to work on the little snail over here. And I am going to have to do this in a couple pieces, not just, to let layers dry, but because life happens. So, we're going to try and get the base layers down in the next half hour or so, and then stop, let it dry, and then I'll come back and we'll see how this goes. So my first color that I'm gonna work with here is the yellow ochre, and I'm just going to take this right out of cap over here. Use that for right now, maybe. Okay. Gonna put a little bit in my palette and then add my water to it. All right. Let's see how this goes. And I'm just gonna kind of try and use what's on the brush and push it around. I'm really not looking to do... I don't know, I've been really enjoying the just the kind of random watercolor, leaving white spaces and not filling the whole thing in, especially with like one solid color. I'm just gonna kind of like dubble my edges out here. Is that a word? Did I just make up a word? Probably. But I can always go back and darken up areas, and I have a couple other colors picked out for later that I'm gonna add in just to give this some definition, and so it's not all like one flat color here. I actually had some reference pictures of snails pulled up on my phone that I was looking at when I picked out my color palette here. I do want to check here, just for... Okay, so no bleed through, which is good. I actually had it bleed through in my Kirby book, which I know people use water in Kirby's books. I've mentioned it before. I don't know if it is the US editions, but none of my Kirby books have liked any water mediums that I have used on them. So I did order, I have the US edition of Mythic World coming, and I also ordered the UK edition off of Book Depository. For science. Because I really want to see if there is a difference in the paper quality. So I was really happy with the response to my tutorial video from last week. It was the underpainting using markers, and if I'm being 100% honest, out of the 3 videos I released last week, that was the one that I was the least sure about. And it wasn't even like the content of the video, it was the quality of it. I have been working on trying to get my DSLR up and running, and unfortunately the amount that I bought for it didn't work. It is, despite the weight that Elgato says their mounts can hold, my camera is too beefy, and it didn't hold up. So my options are to wait until I come back from my work trip and get a different mount if I end up getting a studio built downstairs, or wait until I come back from my work trip and try and get a lighter weight camera. I did look into potentially getting a different camera now, but then we bit the bullet and are about to have a fairly extensive work done to the roof of our house. So I will continue to make do with what I have. But yeah, so I was super pleased with with the response from that video. So I will definitely be planning some additional tutorials. I know a lot of people wanted a longer full project with that technique. So Kirby's got a new book coming out tomorrow. I can probably make that happen. Alright, let's try... So I like the yellow ochre color that I've got here. I'd like to make a little bit of a peachy red as I just throw my wet brush all over the place. It's okay. It's all good. So let me pour my brushes off, or I did not grab a rag. Oops. Super prepared today, you guys. And yes, you can mix these. And I want this to be a pretty light wash. And then I'll have to find some way to include this the magenta in. So maybe I'll use that for the flowers, just that tone. And then it's gonna look pretty flat at this point and very similar until I start going in and doing some of the shading and the additional coloring. But I kind of wanted this like peachy color for our snail guy. And then I may have to mix up a little bit more of this, get my darker tone, since there's quite a bit of water in there. But this would be a... Now I know that these two, the yellow ochre and the magenta, would mix up a nice skin tone if I ever wanted to use these for a portrait. Yeah, I think some nice, like, pink flowers up here would look nice, and it would kind of... It would keep it cohesive, but also just give it a little, like, pop of color, since things are pretty neutral right now. And then there's gonna be some green when I start doing these leaves and whatnot, so... It's been fun experimenting with different media and doing different things for you guys. And I ordered some of the Winsor and Newton inks. We've got those, which will probably end up being used, you know, mixing with these just to have more variety of color. Paper holds up pretty well. And I keep checking to see if there's any like bleeding through. So far, nada. And I just want to try and use up this orange before we take a break and go let this dry, and I go do some adult things while I wait, and then come back and start on some of the other pieces. Trying to smooth a little bit of these edges out while it's still damp. You can kind of push it around, but depending on your paper especially, you have to work kind of quick. There. Alright, so we're going to take a little break. I'm going to let this dry, and then we will come back and start doing some of the flowers and the grass and adding in some darker colors onto our snail shell. So I will see you guys in a bit. And coming back, and I had some time to think about how I wanted to approach the rest of this image, and I have decided that I'm going to do the base layers in the ink, and then we will come in with some pencils and do the detail work. This paper does hold up nice with the water, but I don't want to put too much of that, you know, on it. So I'm just gonna kind of approach it the way I do when I work in my ink house book. So we will finish putting down these base layers, and then I will go off camera, pick some pencils, and come back, and we will finish it up. So this is terracotta, and I'm just going to use this around some of these edges, I think, through here. Pretty dark. Yeah, so part of the reason I made that decision was going back in with more ink, like I would if I was watercoloring. I don't want to lose all of this detail, like all these little like shading lines and whatnot that the artist has provided. And so if I start trying to get a more opaque look with the ink in order to be able to get the values that I need, it's gonna kind of overshadow some of the line work, and didn't really want to do that. But these are pretty fun to work with. I'm enjoying them. It's definitely a bit of a challenge. You have to work pretty quickly to get nice blends. They do dry relatively quickly, so that's something to keep in mind. And like I mentioned in the first part, once these dry, there is no lifting them, so you can always, you know, if you make mistakes and you know, little flubs and whatnot, you can always layer over top of it. So I want these little areas down here to be a bit deeper. That's why I went with the terracotta. And this is just a, this is an Artsmith brush. Since I'm relatively new to inks, and I have heard from some people that you have to be very careful to make sure that your brushes are clean after working with these so that you don't damage your brushes. I went with just my Michaels Joann's brushes versus my Craftimo brushes. So I think I'll just keep those for my watercolor work anyways. Actual, like, strictly watercolor work. We'll get a little bit of the brown up under here, and this is mostly going to be green anyways, so... Well, up here is going to be green anyways. When we get to that. But yes, so there was a bit of a gap in my filming. I managed to get about 20 minutes for that first part yesterday before I had to take one of our piggies to the vet, so... And that was on Monday. This portion is on Tuesday. Usually film these ahead of time to come out on Wednesdays, but I got a little bit behind. And then Kirby's new book comes out today. I actually just checked my my order status, and it should be here today. So I know a lot of people were asking about more marker pencil work, so I'll probably be working on some more of that, maybe for next week. We'll see. So yeah, so a lot of this in here I'm gonna leave for right now, and we'll do the shading detail work on that with a similar color to this, since it's more out in the middle of the shell. And then just use the terracotta in these really dark areas up here. Get a little more water on the brush. I should have worked top to bottom, but my eye kind of just went. Let's see. When he trying to keep some of this texture of these lines too. I like the way that blended out over there. And let's do a little here underneath these mushrooms. So one thing that helps too when you're trying to blend out harsh edges, same thing, similar to working with regular watercolor, is cleaning the ink off of your brush and then making sure that it's damp but not saturated. And if you come at the section that you want to blend your edges out with just a lightly damp brush and kind of come back into your dark area, it will blend your ink out without pulling too much of it up into your lighter area. And another thing that helps too is, rather than doing full strokes, is just kind of licking it back into the darker area where you want it to be darker. That'll kind of keep it where you want it. and also give you a more seamless blend. Just kind of like stipple your brush. All right. This color does dry. This dries quick. My terracotta is already started to dry in my palette. I shouldn't have to do too much pencil work to this, just maybe a little bit of shading up underneath some of these areas. All right, let's see this Van Dyke brown. I think I'm going to use this for our mushrooms. It's got that kind of reddish reddish undertone to it. So now I have to find all of the mushrooms. Since these are pretty tiny, I mean, I could switch to a smaller brush, but I'm not too worried about you know, completely covering the space with the ink. I kind of like a little bit of the white paper in there. Actually, since darken this little area up here. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that I don't see any more little mushrooms anywhere around here. I'm sure as soon as the Van Dyke brown dries on my palette, I will find more mushrooms. Alright, so let's do, and we've got this little frog up here that I almost missed because he blended in. Alright, so let's do some of this greenery. We'll start with that. See how far that gets us before. Before I need to get out more ink. I don't want to pull out too much and then end up wasting it. Yeah, there's a lot of like little fine details down in here. We will definitely go in and do these little detail work with some pencil. I really like the way this is looking so far. Pretty pleased with it. For never having, well, I can't say never having worked with inks. I've watercolored with distress inks, but this is still a little different. And I am going to take some creative liberties here and just add green into areas where I think there would be green. And this will also allow me to be able to get into some of these little like the stems of some of these tiny plants if I just do the whole thing. And then I can darken up certain areas later with the pencils. Because otherwise, this video is going to be like 8 million hours long, and that's a little too much for, for all of us. Let's do these little right here. I wonder if it's just like, it doesn't feel like it, but maybe it's just drier in my office today, and that's why my ink is drying out so quickly. I mean, it's possible, considering that it is snowing here again, so... yeah, we'll definitely have to do some touching up. Okay, let's start on some of these bigger flowers, and I did say that... Oh. Hmm. And I did say I was gonna use the magenta. I won't tell you guys what I just did. But all I will say is don't put your rinse cup next to your beverage. We'll just leave it at that. Alright, so we're gonna use some of... I'm gonna go in here. If I can... magenta for our big flowers. I think this will give it a nice pop of color. It is also the same color that I mixed in with my base yellow for the snail that I made the peachy color. Yeah, it definitely must be drier in my office today, because even on the paper, it's drying a lot quicker than it did the other day. So many flowers, you guys. Yeah, I definitely think it was a good call to go with the pink. It really adds some pop. And I am losing a ton of ink. I don't know. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I'm trying to work quick here before I lose all of my ink, my palette. But I also don't want to, like, rush beyond just working, you know, quickly. That makes sense. Oh. Yeah, I'll have to come back in and darken some of these up. So now that I sit here and think about it, because this is taking me a bit longer to get through than it normally would. Well, I can't necessarily say that, but it's a bit longer for a single video than typically like to do. So I think what I might end up doing is making this a two-parter. So we'll do the rest of the ink in this video, or as much as we can get through before I have to go run errands, and before I get frustrated that everything is drying on me quicker than I would like. And then we will do the pencil work, detail work, as a separate video. And that actually will actually make it easier on me for recording this week. If I just finish this project and then next week I will have hopefully something from Kirby's new book that I can do for next week. Yeah. Okay. So that is going to be the game plan. Is we'll do this video in two parts. Executive decision. That honestly takes some pressure off of me to feel like I need to rush to get this all in one video. Feel better now. Okay, so That being said, I am out of ink. My office is incredibly dry. So I think what I'm going to do, since you guys have seen me color enough of these pink flowers, I'm going to finish the rest of the flowers off camera. I'm going to do just some really tiny little, like, this little nitpicky stuff that I really need to be able to, like, lean over my desk to do. I'll finish up the frog, and then I will see you guys on Friday, and we will come in with some pencils, do the detail work, and possibly the background on Friday. I think I'm just going to do just a really light blue wash around the outside of this. I don't want anything fancy or anything like that, and then I'll have to figure out something to do with the little spots down here where I dripped some ink. So that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to check the video out. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified when I post additional content. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.